All righty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Road to Atlanta. As always, I'm your host, Brooks Austin, and I got my boy, Blaine Gilmer, with me. That way. I always forget which side you're on, Blaine, because to me it looks like you're on my right, so I always want to point at my right, but you're on my left. Tonight's show, we're gonna get a little more concise. We went about an hour last time. I swear I will stop talking as much so Blaine can get back to his wife and kids, and I can get back to my wife and kid. Blaine Gilmer, how are we doing tonight, brother?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Just gave the baby a bath. Should be getting ready for bedtime. Just want to let everybody know. I know this might be streaming to my YouTube page. I am going to be doing an Azeez Ojulari breakdown tonight. I spent about, it's fitting that we're talking about Tennessee tonight. I spent about probably close to an hour before this show looking over the first half of the Tennessee-Georgia game from last year. So I'm excited about that one. So feel free to tune into that. It'll be up tomorrow morning. But anyways, tonight we're going to do 2-for-1, a little 2-for-1 show here on Road to Atlanta. We're going to talk about Auburn. We're going to preview them, and then we're going to jump right into Tennessee before next week's big show, the one everybody's waiting on, and that is the Alabama game. So first, just kind of, to get started here, Blaine, what do you think about immediately second game of the year welcoming Auburn in between the hedges?
Well, obviously, from a Georgia standpoint, you're more than happy that it is at home, whether it's a quarter of a crowd or whatever the capacity is, it ends up being always, better to play in the friendly confines, especially when you're playing a team as talented as Auburn, and they will be talented once again. But I'm not so sure that Kirby Smart minds this challenge. Auburn is not a team that Georgia has struggled too mightily with here in the last couple years. I feel like they feel pretty comfortable with their scheme against Auburn, even though they have the new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of what the Auburn team has coming back. But definitely think, obviously, a big matchup will be probably the biggest of the season to that point for maybe across college football total, but definitely something that I know all college football fans are looking forward to.
Yeah, I would definitely want Auburn earlier in the year. They're not only a team that typically gets better, but we're going to be talking about something, and I guess we can go ahead and hit it off right off the top, man. They lost all 5 of their offensive linemen from a year ago. That's not even to talk about what they lost on the defensive side of the football up front. When you lose 5 offensive linemen, spoiler alert, shocker here, hot take, it's going to take a little while to build a little bit of continuity. And despite what they got in week 1 over there at Auburn, they're not really going to be ready for what they're going to be seeing in Athens against this defensive front from Georgia, who I think is going to be even better than they were last year. Not a lot of tackles for loss last year, about 48th in the country in terms of sack production. I think it's going to get a lot better in the second year under Dan Lanning as defensive coordinator. And I also think, like you talked about last week, Blaine, I think Kirby's going to unbutton a couple buttons off the top of that golf polo he wears on the sideline. So I think they're going to be a little bit more loose, play a lot faster, and get after the quarterback a bit more. So that's troubling for a guy who we can talk about right now, and that's Bo Nix. Look, I'm a believer. I'm here on the Bo Nix train, and I guess we could start there with our disagreements here. Look, I think Bo Nix is a gamer. I think he's a winner. Just watching what he did in fourth quarters last year, came back, had a game-winning drive against Oregon. I thought he fought his balls off, last part of my language, against Georgia last year in that second half. I mean, he was scorching hot that whole entire second half. And a lot of that, you can talk about Georgia playing a lot of quarters, giving up a bunch of stuff underneath. Say what you want. He was getting after it in that second half and playing tough. And then, of course, he beats Alabama. Now, as a freshman, that's pretty big stuff, in my opinion. Now, the other games you can talk about, Blaine, didn't play so hot. I think as I was doing my preview for the Georgia game, I think he had 6 interceptions on the season, and they came from 3 football games. It was Oregon, LSU, in Florida leading up to that Georgia game. So the rest of them, he played interception and turnover free. So the games that he plays against top competition, I think he battles, but I also think he made some mistakes last year. But that was, to me, more based off him being a freshman in the SEC. I think Auburn's got a winner on their hands in Bo Nix. I just don't know if they've got the supporting cast around him this year, and it might look rough. What say you about Bo Nix? We'll start there.
Well, see, that's my whole argument against Bo Nix. It's not really anything to do as much with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a heck of an athlete, much better football player than, of course, I could ever dream about or most people could ever dream about being. But Bo Nix is not someone who is going to be able to just full scale carry a football team the way that Auburn is going to need him to carry a football team at the beginning of this year. And also, I definitely don't think he's the type of quarterback that is good enough just to run off a Joey Gatewood and go all in on him like that. I mean, Auburn fans may look back here in a couple years and look back at it as a Jake Fromm, Justin Fields type situation. I mean, that's how good I think Joey Gatewood could be. He could be a really, really good quarterback up there in Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, I don't know if Auburn comes into this game with a win. I think Auburn may lose to Kentucky, and here's why. You just mentioned all 5 offensive linemen are going to be new in front of Bo Nix. Bo Nix could be fantastic. If he's not standing straight up and down and being able to throw the football, I don't know how much of a difference it makes. And Coach Stoops in Kentucky is going to have an experienced, very talented defense coming back. So that could be a whole nother show to talk about that game between Kentucky and Auburn. But I just think when you look at Bo Nix, what they had to do last year, 50 pass attempts against the University of Georgia. Yes, he got hot at the end. When you have to throw the ball 50 times against the University of Georgia, you're losing that game. You're not going to win the game when you have to throw the ball 50 times against Georgia. And we'll get into later what they lost in the running game, but virtually no experience at the running back position with him, no experience on the offensive line. There's no indictment on Bo Nix himself. It's in the indictment that I don't think Bo Nix is, a Cam Newton type guy that Auburn had in the past, a Superman, that can carry him and do it all.
Absolutely. I think that's fair criticism, right? I mean, he's definitely a quarterback that's going to need some help in terms of protection. Every quarterback does to some extent, but even though he's a little bit mobile, he can, make throws outside the pocket. The clips we've seen from Auburn up to this point in training camp, man, he's running for his life. I mean, it looks like Joe Burrow up there in Cincinnati. So that's what we kind of expect from that offensive line. It's going to look probably pretty rough early on in the season. Let's talk about this running game, though. You mentioned it. They lose Boobie Whitlow. All right, he's gone out of the program. DJ Williams last year, 84 carries, 400 yards. But the guy I want to talk about most is Tank Bigsby. Look, Tank Bigsby is a Georgia product, Peach State product, right? It's kind of a head scratcher why Georgia was never really in on it, never seemed really interested in running down Tank Bigsby. Blaine, I know you're our recruiting guy. You probably know a little bit more about him. I know I love his running style. What say you about Tank Bigsby? What he's going to do as a freshman?
Tank is definitely an explosive athlete. He's somebody that Georgia was definitely in on it in the beginning. It just didn't progress, I guess, as things went on. There was some layered behind the scenes stuff going on in that recruitment as well, that kind of swung things the other way. So, in terms of Tank Bigsby, I look for him to be able to obviously contribute for Auburn, but when you're having to piece together the whole deal that Gus Malzahn likes to do, because playing offensive line for Gus Malzahn is not the easiest thing in the world. I mean, you got multiple schemes. You've got, true zone, there's split zone, there's gap scheme, counter trades, all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of different fits and a lot of different techniques that those offensive linemen are asked to do. Then throw in, the pass protections against the unbelievable amount of, different fronts and stunts and games and blitzes that you see each and every week, especially against a team early on with like a Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart coach team. It's going to be tough sledding, I think, for Auburn's run game to begin with, especially losing a guy like Boobie Whitlow. And my argument against, people like to say that, Bo Nix was a freshman last year. And that kind of like you were saying for him, he was only a freshman. Well, you may could argue that's the most talented team he's going to be on for a while.
This is fair.
Too. So I think, DJ Williams, obviously Sean Shivers and Tank Bigsby are tremendously talented, but coming in second game against unbelievably talented Georgia defense and experienced Georgia defense, second game at Athens, going to be difficult for them.
100%. Let's move on from the running backs, and we got to be tighter tonight, Blaine. You and I both. All right, Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, about as freaky as they get at the wide receiver position, and kind of for two different reasons, right? I mean, Schwartz is a world-class track athlete. Both put up relatively good numbers last year. Williams 59 catches for 830 yards. Kind of gave Georgia a little bit of problems in that second half. So did Schwartz as well. Schwartz, though, they're going to have to manufacture touches for these guys. I don't see Bo Nix having the ability to sit in that pocket and throw bombs. So what are you going to be able to do to get these guys open early in the play design, basically? And that's one thing Malzahn's good at, right? Getting the ball into his playmakers' hands really quickly. And they're going to have to scheme things up. Bottom line, on offense this coming up year, they're going to have to figure out ways to get the ball out of Bo Nix's hands early, and then eventually start to take some deep shots, some three-step, get the ball out now, throw it with some air up underneath it, and let Seth Williams go get it in some one-on-one situations. But apart from that, man, what do you really do? And what do you really have at the wide receiver position in Auburn, Blaine?
Well, honestly enough, they have Malcolm Johnson Jr., who reclassified that Georgia wanted very badly. He is reclassified, and instead of graduating this spring, he is actually already on campus for Auburn. So he is a true.
You're going to see it more and more.
Yeah, he's a true speed demon. He's a true speed demon, just like Schwartz is. Expect Schwartz to be used every which way possible. I wouldn't be even surprised to see him lined up actually in the backfield at running back to do some gadget type stuff with. Schwartz is going to be used a lot, and Seth Williams is just that tough receiver on the outside that's going to make great catches and really give Bo Nix a lot of room to kind of try to fit throws in there to him because of his catch radius and his ability to go up and get balls.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do with Malcolm Johnson Jr., but I'll tell you this, Auburn fans probably really could use a George Pickens right about now. They absolutely could. A guy that you don't really need. I mean, 3 seconds. If you give a quarterback 3 seconds, George Pickens will get his butt open. I guarantee you that right now. In any offense, against any defense, against any corner, they could use that former Auburn commit right now 100%. But you could say the same about a lot of offenses across the country. Let's move over to the defensive side of the football, Blaine. Man, they got a linebacker who everybody's extremely high on. But KJ Britt. I mean, right? Highly recruited, highly esteemed, highly touted coming into Auburn. Last year, 69 tackles and 10 tackles for loss, right? A disruptive football player. My only question about KJ is what can he do in terms of, pass or getting disruptive plays in the pass game. I know he can stop the run. To me, he looks a lot like, watching him play and watching him on tape, he looks a lot like Monty Rice to me. He's a two-down linebacker, which in today's day of football is not really, I mean, it's useful. Don't get me wrong. You can lead the team in tackles like Monty Rice did last year, only playing first and second down. But on third down, you almost become compromised. I mean, you almost have to come off the field. And that's what happened in games like LSU. KJ Britt wasn't even on the field. They couldn't play him. They had to play Owen Pappo, who we're going to talk about in a second. They had to play Owen Pappo at middle linebacker because he was able to cover and run with backs out of the backfield and do things like that. I think if you get KJ Britt out of the box, he becomes really compromised. Other than that, I don't see a lot of football teams trying to load up and run the ball because they know KJ Britt is an absolute run stopper. What do you think about number 33 in the blue and orange?
I mean, obviously, leading tackler that's returning for them. They lost their two leading tacklers ahead of him to graduation the year before. But, KJ Britt obviously is going to – I mean, he's like you said, he's going to be that run stopper guy. He's going to be that solid linebacker. But the game is changing a little bit. Obviously, today, Todd Monken talking about Georgia being more balanced, trying to create more explosive plays. They're going to have a quarterback run game element more this year, we would think. So, it's going to put stress on any defense. And I do think it's going to be more guys like Owen Pappo that are going to have to be heavily relied upon for Auburn. But obviously, anytime you lose your entire secondary, which Auburn did. Yeah. So they lost their entire secondary and they lose Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson. I don't care how good KJ Britt is. That's a lot to lose in front of you.
Yeah, I would imagine you're going to see Big Cat Bryant play all over the field. You're going to see him standing up. You're going to see him down in a five tech, similar to what Marlon Davidson did last year for him. They're going to be relying a lot on that guy up front. I mean, he basically is their front seven. I mean, him and KJ Britt. And this guy who I'm really excited to see in year two, and it's Owen Papo, man. I haven't seen a freakier guy come out of the state of Georgia in a long time on the defensive side of the football. This is a dude that was invited to the opening as a rising sophomore. The only player ever to be invited to the Nike opening as a rising sophomore. Typically, it's only there for juniors and seniors. And he held his own while he was out there as well. So, a Grayson product, say what you want about Grayson, but they put him out. They put him out year in and year out. They'll have a bunch more this year, go play D1 football. And this might be the best they've ever had, honestly. I mean, they've had some great football players. But Robert Nkedici was a freak coming out of high school, but he really didn't produce in college. I don't see a way that we're looking in 2 years where we look back and say, Owen Papo didn't produce. That's not going to happen. He's going to be all over the field. He's going to create havoc. He's going to, intercept footballs. He's going to rush the passer. He was a Marcus Howard, former Georgia defensive end, this summer, working on pass rush moves to get after the quarterback. And when you try to get this guy in a pass rush situation, isolated with a running back, man, he's going to make you look stupid. I mean, he's going to make you look absolutely stupid. I'm thinking you're going to see, 3 or 4 sacks this year, a dozen tackle for losses, and about 65 to 70 tackles. I think those are reasonable expectations in year 2 for the freak, as they call him, out of Grayson High School. Let's get your opinions quick on Owen Papo before we move on to these coordinators. Oh,
obviously they're gonna move him around. He like you said, he's that guy that's just a generational type freak athlete. And Auburn, has come away with that, and a highly coveted prospect turned into a tremendous freshman ball player for him last year, and they're going to be relying on him heavily with losing that tandem that created so much havoc for him with Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson. Obviously, I know Papo more at the linebacker, type role, but still they're going to rely on people like Papo to be able to fill that gap of creating those negative plays for the opposing offenses.
All right, we're going to move on to the offensive coordinator. And Blaine, I'm going to let you start it because you put in the show notes. I mean, it's basically derogatory here for Chad Morris. Blaine Gilmer, not a fan of Chad Morris. Let's go ahead, start it up.
It's not that I'm not a fan of Chad Morris as a person. I think he's a good guy, but his record just was abysmal. Just absolutely sucked at Arkansas. It was an embarrassment. Not maybe not all to his own fault, but when you lose to North Texas, and when you have just the monumental struggles that they had, everybody thought, here goes Chad Morris, the guy who, did magic with Deshaun Watson at Clemson. Well, guess what? I think everybody's figured out since then that Deshaun Watson's a pretty good football player. And, the saying goes, good players make good coaches. And so he struggled since then. He is a very creative offensive mind, Chad Morris is. But the other question you have to ask is, it's much like a Dan Lanning trying to make his role into a Kirby Smart coach team, because Kirby Smart's a defensive guy. How much control is Gus Malzahn actually going to let Chad Morris have? The offense is Gus's baby. I mean, he even said before last season he never wanted to relinquish play calling duties ever again. Yeah. So bringing in a guy who obviously has head coaching experience now and he can bounce ideas off of, that's valuable. But what's that dynamic going to look like when it comes game day for those two? So that's something they're going to have to fill out as well.
Yeah, a little story time with Brooks. We always like to do this here. My brother played at Auburn, played baseball at Auburn. Was baseball football program. They actually shared a training facility, so he would be in there. Basically, this is a Gene Chizik time. This is Cam Newton national championship kind of days. That was Blake's freshman year out there at Auburn. Shout out to the big bro. But here's what we came to find out. Gus Malzahn might be one of the biggest control freaks in the history of control freaks. Like, so much so that during practice, when they were in the outdoor facility, every single building that had a window that you could see the outdoor practice field was forced to have the shades closed. That's how much of a control freak Gus Malzahn is. So when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, I don't know how much control he's going to have, because we know, like you said, Blaine, not only is he a control freak, but he is so heavily involved and so heavily imprinted into that offense. It's what he does. There is a reason Kevin Steele is his assistant head coach. That guy has free reign to do whatever the hell he wants on the defensive side of the football. I would venture to say Gus Malzahn might stick his head into a defensive meeting to make sure nobody's sleeping, but he probably closes the door immediately thereafter. I mean, it's as close to the dynamic that we're getting at Georgia on the defensive side of the football as Auburn has on the offensive side of the football. Kirby Smart's the same way. I mean, he's not as much of a control freak. He gives Dan Lanning some freedom to do what he wants, but when push comes to shove, Kirby gets the final call on the defense side of the football. But the difference is I think Gus makes all the calls on the offensive side of the football because that's his baby. I mean, everything they do is designed around him. That offense hasn't changed through 3 different offensive coordinators during his time as the head coach at Auburn. So that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. You're up there. You might have an input on calling plays, but you're basically there to chart practice and make sure everything goes smoothly and probably coach quarterbacks. I would imagine that's what Chad Morris is doing. So we could say Chad Morris is the offensive coordinator, but what we're telling you is Gus is the offensive coordinator, and that's that. You're going to see a lot of gimmicks. You're going to see a lot of, quick passes. You're going to see a lot of motions and all that good stuff. It is traditional, crazy spread offense. That's what it is. So let's move on to the defense coordinator, who I'm a big fan of Kevin Steele, Blaine. I think he's one of the best to be doing it in the last decade, especially with what he does there at Auburn. They are so diversified. They do a whole bunch of stuff. But we're really going to find out what he's about this year, especially with how much they've lost up front. So the defense is going to be flying to the football. They're going to give you a variety of fronts, and they're going to blitz and slant and do all that crazy stuff. What do you think about Kevin Steele?
I mean, obviously, he's been there. Like you said, Gus, trust him immensely to do what and why wouldn't he? The most that he's an Auburn defense has averaged given up per game for a season while he's there is 19 points a game. I mean, that's stout.
That's incredible.
That's stout. There in 4 seasons, the highest they've allowed is 19.
With how fast they play too. I mean, on the offensive side of the football, to only give up 19 points per game, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, they fly to the ball. Obviously, Georgia, it's no secret, tried to emulate what Auburn did versus LSU last year because they held LSU to 20 points, the lowest output LSU had all year. Georgia was trying to use that 7 defensive back type scheme against that Joe Burrow, juggernaut offense. And then
Clemson turned right around in the national championship game, tried to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
They opened with the same thing.
So people were trying to, emulate what Kevin Steele does. He's a creative, very solid defensive coach. Just signed a 3-year extension with Auburn in the offseason. So he's going to, be on the plains for a while. And that's going to be the biggest challenge that Georgia has is they have no matter which quarterback it is, they have a new quarterback in a new system that's only going to be in a second game, probably not going to have been extremely tested in the first game versus Arkansas. At least if Georgia's anywhere near the caliber we think they are, they won't be tested in that first game. Auburn will have already been punched in the face a little bit, like Mike Tyson, said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Well, Auburn's going to get punched in the mouth first week. I'm not saying they 100% lose to Kentucky, but it's not going to be a cakewalk that first week. So, I think Kevin Steele, for Georgia has the advantage of, they won't have a lot on tape to that point in terms of Todd Monken with this set of players. But it'll be an interesting matchup.
All right, let's get right into it. Final little segment here before we move on to buy and sell. Let's get game score predictions, and let's get them from the folks listening too. So feel free to comment what you think the game score is going to be, Auburn, Georgia. So you get them at home. There is no line currently yet for this football game. But Blaine, we'll start with you. Game's at home in Athens. Auburn comes in after what's going to be a dogfight over there at Kentucky. So what do you say?
I think it's going to be a physical contest, like you said, for Auburn week 1. It'll be interesting to see how healthy they come into the game, not only because, it's a physical SEC contest against a good, well-coached team, but also with this COVID-shortened offseason. Nobody knows how you're going to hold up week 1. I would expect there to be a lot of injuries from a lot of teams week 1, a lot of banged up stuff. And I think that, like we said, last week, Kirby Smart's defense is going to play in a more aggressive, more high octane level this year. I mean, creating havoc. I think Georgia creates turnovers for, taking advantage of that young offensive line for Auburn, puts Bo Nix in some bad situations. Auburn, I think, trails early and then they have to throw to catch up. Georgia wins 31-17.
31-17. I think that's a pretty good little prediction there. I'm going to go 35-14. I'm like you. I don't think this is going to be a very close football game from start to finish. It might, obviously every game starts close, right? But I think Georgia coming off, there's no way Todd Monken opens up everything he's got against Arkansas. Okay, it's going to be a very It's going to be a very plain attack, a very bland attack, if you will, on the offensive side of the football. And then you're going to start seeing them slowly open it up and save all the big weapons for Alabama. But they're going to show you a little bit of stuff as it comes through during this Auburn football game. We got a comment right here, Top Dog Blogging says 31-10, UJ wins. So he's kind of on the same, sentiment as us, okay? Kind of split between us. Doesn't think Georgia scores as much as I do. Doesn't think Auburn scores as much as either one of us. I don't know. I think Auburn gets two explosive plays, two big plays into this football game because that's typically what they do. There's a 70-yarder in an Auburn football game almost dating back to the Cam Newton days. It's week in and week out. They find a way to do it. So I think that's what happens at least once, and then they maybe grind a touchdown out late in this football game. But very, very controlled attack from Georgia. And I'm like you. I don't think there's any way this offensive line holds up after just 1 week. I don't think they hold up against Kentucky. I think you're looking at 3 or 4 sacks in Lexington. I think they play in Lexington. I think you're looking at 3 or 4 sacks there and then coming to Athens and getting whooped up on by this defensive line as well. So those are our game predictions. Let's get into stock options, Blaine, real quick. Who are you buying in this game? Stocks of Georgia players that you are absolutely buying in this football game.
I think Zeus. I think, Zamir White makes a statement in this game. Always when it comes down to a Georgia-Auburn game, it's always going to end up being at the end of it, who can run the ball and who can stop the run. I think Zeus does it. And then Trey McKitty, I think, once you get a run game established, I think then the defense sucks up and you be able to hit those play action passes, things like that behind him. I think Trey McKitty is going to be a force in that area this year for Georgia.
Yeah, recent history would tell you Todd Monken likes to use a little bit of tight ends in play action. So I'm there with you on that one. I'm buying the entire defense line group in this football game for exactly what we're just talking about. We'll move on. Blaine, you're selling a guy that I like. Who you got? Who you selling in this football game? Could be Auburn player, could be Georgia, scheme, could be anything you want. Who are you selling in this football game?
I mean, I'm selling Bo Nix. I don't think Bo Nix is, got what he needs to do by himself. Essentially, I don't think the Auburn offensive line will be ready. So I think it's going to diminish Bo Nix's abilities in this game, and he'll have to try to do a whole lot more on his own, maybe force some things in Georgia's defense, create some turnovers against the sophomore.
Fair sell there. I'm selling Malzahn as a whole for the entire 2020 season. And here's why. You're going to have to gimmick more than you've ever had to gimmick at Auburn this year with what they got up front on that offensive line. And I think at some point he's going to run out of gimmicks. I think it's just going to happen, okay? Now, they run the football pretty well historically over there at Auburn under Malzahn, so maybe that's what they end up relying upon. But they're going to be down in a lot of football games, and they don't have a ton of firepower. So that would concern me if I'm an Auburn fan. All right.
Good luck trying to run it against Georgia.
Exactly. And good luck trying to run the football against Georgia. But again, like I was saying earlier, I think they're going to be down early in that football game. So they're going to have to put the ball in the air to move the football and score points quickly. All right, let's get into this Tennessee preview. We promised you 2 tonight, and we're a little bit behind schedule. Shocker. But let's be quick on Tennessee. We got 15 minutes to roll through this one. I think this is a more favorable matchup for the opposition than what Auburn has coming in. I think Tennessee's going to be a better football team in 2020 than Auburn is in 2020, but we'll have to see how things shake out. What say you, Blaine? Just a brief preview before we get into top returners and whatnot, offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, brief synopsis on Tennessee in 2020.
Well, they've kind of forgotten what it's like to lose. I mean, they've been on a win streak for a long time, and that kind of momentum can really carry you into an off season, especially an off season that is buoyed by what has been a excellent recruiting class for Tennessee. So there's a lot of good feelings up in Knoxville right now.
Yeah, a lot of good feelings, and we're going to get into some more about some of the things that staffers across the SEC and across other conferences have been telling me. A lot of coaches across the country are waiting for Tennessee to fall on their face. I'm going to tell you that right now. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but let's talk about some of these top returners. Got to start with Trey Smith. I was stunned that he came back to Tennessee for his senior year. He was going to be a top 60 pick last year in the NFL draft, a borderline lock to be such. Promised his mom he was going to get his college degree, which, hey, man, you could have got that during your offseason. But, hey, it's all good. You're going to end up being a first-round, second-round pick anyways, barring some type of major injury. He leads what could be the best offensive line Tennessee's seen in, a couple of decades. I'm a big fan of Wagner Morris. I know he got lit up, and we're going to show it on our YouTube breakdown against Azeez Ojulari. No, he got lit up against Georgia and very early on in that football season last year, but he's a true freshman playing left tackle in the SEC. That's tough to do. He played well towards the end of the season, and just an extremely promising prospect out there at the left tackle position. You got Trey Smith playing left guard, Brandon Kennedy, and I guess we can stop and talk about Cade Mays, and it's something I'm in buy and sell I'm going to talk about later, but I think he's going to play, and I'll tell you why later. And then Darnell Wright at the right tackle position. That offensive line is pretty dang stout, Blaine.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously they're returning a lot of talent. They've got some guys who were highly coveted coming out of high school, and like you said, Trey Smith is just a bona fide rock star up there up front. Very very physical, extremely athletic for his size. And the quarterback situation is going to really be the big question for Tennessee as you come into this. So. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But like I said, Tennessee, that having played 2 SEC games before them, what I think Georgia's lucky that they have them at home. But having to play 2 SEC games before them, and a very physical game against Auburn. It's going to be challenging. Can you bring that level once again, week in and week out, and then knowing what you have ahead in Alabama? That's going to be the big thing. So can you show some maturity? Georgia's going to be the more talented team, but can they show the maturity to focus on the task at hand, not look ahead to Alabama?
Yeah, that's going to be the thing, right? I mean, the last 3 years, Georgia's kind of had that hiccup, that slip-up type of football game last year at South Carolina. They're going to have to avoid that this year. And there's a lot of them in that schedule. The Tennessee game, right, that we're talking about right now kind of stands out prior to Alabama. Kentucky prior to a bye week, after Alabama, before Florida. That's kind of freaky too, especially what Kentucky's got up front. That's going to be a physical football game. If they're not, prepared and alert for that football game, might sneak up on them. But let's talk about this quarterback position. Jared Garantano is a guy I got to watch a lot this summer. He was in the Atlanta area working out with Tony Ballard pretty much the whole summer. Him and Harrison Bailey throwing back and forth. I'm going to tell you what, Garantano looks, chef's kiss in shorts and a T-shirt. That dude can throw the damn football, and he is physically impressive. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's 6'3 and a half, 6'4", 230 pounds. I mean, a frightening looking dude if you're worried about the physicality and measurables of a quarterback and facing him. My only problem is he makes a lot of bad decisions. He is very careless with the football, and that's not something we got to see this fall or this offseason because he was throwing on air almost the whole time. But it's something that shows up on tape pretty damn quickly, and it results in the stat sheet as well. Less than 60% completion percentage last year, 16 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Look, hot take. In modern football, if you're a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, you can't play. You're not going to stay in the lineup, and he didn't stay in the lineup for the better part of the year last year. They were flirting with Brian Maurer the entire season. So, and he actually ended up starting against Georgia. Georgia fans remember that, and got his freaking bell rung by Eric Stokes. Yes, he does. What do you think about this quarterback position? I think Garantano is going to end up being the guy. They're going to go with him. It's his final year in Tennessee, and it's all about whether or not Jim Cheney can get some continuity here and develop this quarterback position because he's talented as all get out.
See, I think Harrison Bailey. Why would you not go with Harrison Bailey? What do you have to lose? You are not going to the SEC championship or the playoffs if you're Tennessee this year. Play Harrison Bailey.
I was gonna get to it. Harrison Bailey, from what we're being told from our guys at SI.com over there at Volunteer Country, he may or may not have been, in the midst of a COVID scare during camp. Okay, so if he doesn't play early, that's why. I'm with you though. They took rep after rep all summer with Tony Ballard, and the arm talent and the arm strength's compatible. I mean, it's almost identical. Obviously, Garantano, a much better athlete at this point, but that's just because Harrison Bailey's 18 years old and he's a freshman in college. Garantano is what appears to be a 25-year-old senior. So, yeah, I would play Harrison Bailey too. You're not playing for a college football playoff. You might as well get 3. You're going to get 3 or 4 years out of him. You might as well get every rep you possibly can.
Also, he's a tremendous recruiter for Tennessee right now. Like he's in this COVID deal where you can't have visits.
Yeah, you can't spoil that kid's taste. You can't put a bad taste in that kid's mouth. You're right.
He is really going to the stump for Tennessee right now. I just think he ends up playing. He's 6'5", 225. At 18 years old, like you said, he's a grown man too. He's got to do. He's not been in a college weight room, so there's some sculpt into that body that's got to come into play. But even if it's not, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a dual quarterback system type thing going by, at least by.
They're known for it. I mean, Jim Cheney has no problems playing multiple quarterbacks. That the only thing I would say is, and this might be a hot take, but I think you could say Harrison Bailey had better weapons at Marietta last year than he might have this year at Tennessee. I mean,
he had a Reed Gilbert.
Yeah, he had a Reed Gilbert, a Colorado State commit, and a running back that was pretty damn good at Marietta too. So we'll see. I mean, he was loaded with weapons his entire time there. Let's flip over to the defense side of the football. They got a corner that's kind of sneaking his way. I mean, going under the radar for the most part in the SEC country. Nobody really talking about him, but that's Bruce Thompson as a rising junior up there. Well, he led their team in interceptions last year with 3, and he's really trying to itch his way into that Eric Stokes. I'm blanking on Buddy's name from Alabama, Derek Stingley Jr., into that conversation for that top cornerback spot, or at least top 5 cornerback spot in the SEC. He's a pretty daggone good football player. Blaine, I'll let you talk about Henry Toto, or Toto. I don't even Toto. I'm guessing that's Toto Tutu. Henry Tutu, the SEC all-freshman team.
I mean, anytime you got guys like Kirk Herbstreit and people like that going to town, getting on television and talking about, you're going to be the next one, the really, really great player. Obviously, he's talented. But I think the biggest thing for Tennessee's defense is when you turn on a Tennessee defense the last 4 years, what's the name that you see all over you see him everywhere making tackles like that. It was Nigel Warrior. And they lost Nigel Warrior. Nigel Warrior moved on to the pros and went undrafted, but he was just one of those guys, ended up signing with the Baltimore Ravens. But, when you lose a glue guy like that, you gotta go in and try to replace him. In Tennessee, obviously, like I said, a ton of talented guys. Got a lot of confidence, played good team defense. Pruitt is an excellent defensive coach. And they're gonna be ready. Obviously, it's gonna be a question of how healthy each team is going into that game. And then I think by that third game, though, it's going to be quite the matchup between the chess match between what Pruitt is wanting to do defensively and Todd Monken on offense. I think that's really where it's going to come down to in that matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. A veteran on their front 7. I know we didn't talk about much of their defensive line. Daryl Middleton is a defensive end out there that really came on towards the end of the year last year. That's courtesy of Matt Ray over there at Volunteer Country. So you guys, I know we don't have any Tennessee fans here, but if y'all want some information on what they're doing, head on over there. He's pretty plugged in. All right, let's move on to Jim Cheney. Very familiar with the Georgia fan base. What are your initial thoughts, Blaine? I know, I got hired to cover Georgia just, a year and a half ago at this point. So Cheney was already out. Didn't do a ton of studying on what he did because I knew we were going to have, a new offensive coordinator that I was going to need to study up with at Georgia. So what do you got on Jim Cheney for me, Blaine?
Well, I mean, I think Jim Cheney over the years has shown that he wants to throw the football. I mean, he wants to let it rip. And I think when Tennessee was gotten to the point last year where they were starting to roll, you started seeing them take more downfield shots, and Garantano and them being able to sit in the pocket and deliver the ball down the field a little bit more. I think Harrison Bailey, when he gets the shot, that's one thing he can do is he can let it go. He's going to be able to make those throws. So I think Jim Cheney, obviously, people can say, oh, it's not personal for stuff like that. Coaches, they make millions of dollars. They're still human beings. It's still going to be a little bit personal, coming back to Athens, especially after Georgia goes up and whoops up on them last year. So, he's going to want to come into Athens and put up a good showing, and it's going to be that quarterback situation really for both Tennessee and Georgia this year. Who's the quarterback? What does the offense look like? That's the answer. That's the question that has to be answered for both sides. But I think Jim Cheney, when he's at his best, he's taking shots down the field. And even when Jake Fromm, who didn't have the strongest arm in the world, when Georgia was clicking, it was Miko Hardman. It was Terry Godwin, all those guys making plays down the field that Georgia had success with, of course, with the running game as well.
The more and more we sit here and talk about it, the more and more I'm, a proponent of playing Harrison Bailey, because I don't think you're ever going to have an offensive line in front of him that's going to be able to protect him like you do this year. So if all he can do is throw deep balls year one, if that's it, if you can just give him one reads, and I think he's going to be able to do a lot more than that. I'm a big fan of what Harrison can do. I'm more of a big fan of his energy and what he can do. Just kind of, everyone wants to talk about that swag level that he's got. I think he really does have that. He's a competitor. He loves to get after it and play hard. So if all you can do is sit him back there, because he is pretty much a statue. He's not one of these guys that's going to be running around being mobile. But if you can sit him back there, protect him like they will be able to do this year, or we expect them to be able to do this year, let them take bombs, because that's what Cheney wants to do, right? I mean, he wants to be just like Monken in the sense that he wants to be explosive. So they got a young running back in Eric Gray that I think is going to really take a leap in year two. So maybe a little dose of the running back and then throw some deep bombs. I think that's what you're going to be seeing from Jim Cheney and this offensive staff out there at Tennessee. As far as their defensive coordinator, takes a dual role out there. Now, I know Pruitt is heavily involved in that defensive side of the football because that's his background, but Derek Ansley is a guy that I'm pretty high on. All right. I think he's a young, energetic football coach. I think he's probably going to be on track for a head coaching job at some point. Second year as a coordinator out there at Tennessee. And honestly, man, I think he can really coach up some defensive backs. And he's going to need to this year because he's got a really young group back there that's going to get a lot put on them. Because I don't see Tennessee getting after the quarterback very much. Blaine, do you have any opinions on our defensive coordinator, Derek Ansley, out there at Tennessee?
No, like you said, it's going to be imperative that it's going to be a big coaching job, like you said, because of the replacing, in my mind, who was the heart and soul of their defense in Nigel Warrior, because he was not only he was just kind of that glue guy. He could play him at multiple spots. Was really a leader, and Derek Ainsley is going to have to really step up and make sure that that secondary is good on checks and different coverages and all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure they work tirelessly on. But like you said, when it comes down to it, Jeremy Pruitt's the defensive guy.
All right, score prediction real quick before we get into stock options. Go ahead, Blaine.
I'm going to say this is a game where Georgia may be feeling a little bit of their injuries, a little bit of the grind that they've been going through, a more low-scoring game. I'm going to say Georgia 28, Tennessee 17.
Yeah, I'm going to go 27-14. I like you, Blaine. I'm a little concerned about early season injuries this year more than ever. It's been a very condensed offseason. These guys are getting ramped up. I mean, we are a month away from the start of the season, and I got offensive coordinators standing in front of the media today complaining about only having 5 offensive practices. 5 practices where they've actually had a chance to look at guys throw the damn football. It is something that we have never seen before, ever. Not to mention they took a whole almost 7 weeks off and away from campus, out of the weight room. I mean, it is going to be something that I'm really concerned about at the start of the football season. I think you're going to see a lot of non-contact injuries. So whoever can deal with those the best. And Georgia's got one of the best, strength and conditioning staffs and health staffs in the country. So I think they're going to be okay. But it's an unpredictable thing. You never know when it's going to happen. I'm with you. I'm going 27, 10, 27, 14, that range right there. I think Georgia controls the game for the most part, but doesn't really light it up, if you will. Again, saving it up for what they got against Alabama. Let's get into stock options before we tell the folks good night. What are you buying in this football game, Blaine?
I'm going to buy Tyreek Stevenson in this game because he's a guy that I think, Tennessee, obviously, they're going to take those shots downfield, but I think DJ Daniel and Eric Stokes, Tyson Campbell, whatever that rotation ends up being at the corner position, they take care of that. But then they're going to try to be creative underneath and do some stuff in the run game. Tyreek Stevenson is going to be kind of that in that star position, the jack of all trades. Him, Mark Webb, those are the guys that I think are going to be key in this game. They may even use them, as you saw Georgia last year using Eric Stokes on a corner blitz. They're going to get it innovative with that kind of stuff. Tyreek Stevenson is a guy who I like in this game.
All right, here's my buy. I know we got Georgia fans. We got a handful of people listening right now. I guarantee 99.9% of them Georgia fans. Cade Mays is going to play this fall, folks. That's what I'm buying. I'm buying 100% Cade Mays' big ugly butt is playing at right guard for Tennessee this fall. And here's why. What are you waiting on an NCAA transfer for? This is a take I've been all over since the beginning of this free Cade Mays crap. Look, guys, the SEC's playing without the Big 12's playing. The ACC's playing without two other Power 5 conferences. Half of the FBS ain't playing. So what is the NCAA? They've already put their hands up and said, we're not taking any of your years of eligibility. We're not doing anything. We're just staying back, letting everybody file for an additional year if they want it. Basically saying this year don't count, but the college football playoff does. I mean, that's what they've already done. So what makes you think that Cheney or Jeremy Pruitt, is sitting around going, okay, NCAA, you can tell me I can't play one of my best players. That's fine. I'm not going to do it. No. I think all of these guys that are waiting on transfer waivers, not only I think it's a moot point anyways, because I think they're all going to get approved because they've refiled under, some toxic claims. They claim there's a toxic environment over in Georgia, but whatever. Most of these things get approved after they fight them out. They got to get them lawyer fees wrapped up. That's all I'm saying. They got to get them racked up. But I think he ends up playing. That's what I'm buying. Blaine, quick sell. What are you selling?
I'm just going to sell that Georgia totally dominates this game because I think, Tennessee's much improved, and I think Georgia is going to be coming off coming off a tough game against Auburn. I think they end up handling it towards the end, but I think it could be, rough sledding early on for Georgia.
All right. I'm selling not anything in this football game, but I'm selling that 2021 recruiting class to Tennessee. I'm gonna tell you right now, I am selling that thing. I'm shorting it. This is the Big Short. This is the Big Short, the movie. I'm talking big time. Take it to the bank. Short. Look, I spoke to a recruiting staffer. Now he's out of the SEC, but he's pretty plugged in. Spoke to an SEC recruiting staffer and said this quote: Tennessee has a highly rated class because of the lack of accurate re-rankings. Their top commitments did not have a committable offer from the schools that UT beat them out on. Okay, so that's one thing. He went on to say that Dylan Brooks and Terrence Lewis, they're, top recruits, the guys that Tennessee fans will throw in your mentions all day long. He said, quote, calling those guys 5 stars is flat out terrible evaluating. Terrible. Did not mince words. Terrible evaluating. So not high on Terrence Lewis and Dylan Brooks. And what he's also not high on, and what I'm not high on, is this pipe dream that they're selling at Tennessee. They're selling success, and there ain't much success. They're selling, we won 6 out of our last 7 games. They're selling, yeah, I know we lost to Georgia State, but we won 6 in a row. We closed out great. Players love playing for Pruitt. All that good stuff. They're selling all that stuff, and they're buying too, if you know what I mean. But anyways,
Those Tostitos are a little stale from the Fiesta Bowl back in '98.
Exactly. Okay, so I am completely selling the 2021 recruiting class for the University of Tennessee. Call me back in February. If they've got all these guys still in their group in February of this year, you can call me back. But there's a couple of those prospects in that group that I'm not going to name because, I'm not sold at all on most of those guys in that group. So there's a couple guys I like. I'm not here to crap on all of them, but there's a couple guys I like in that group in terms of a prospect. But this has been the road to Atlanta for Blaine Gilmer, my guy over there. Y'all check out this guy's work. Y'all follow him on Twitter. This is one of the best dudes doing it in the recruiting industry. Got a fire edit coming up for you guys. One of the nation's top uncommitted football players is about to narrow down a top 3. So y'all follow him and be paying attention to that. You guys, I'm Brooks Austin, right there on the bottom. This has been Road to Atlanta. We will be back next week with an Alabama preview. So for all you guys that have been tuning in and staying in here for the end, you got a little hot take from me on the 2021 UT class. So I'm sure you guys enjoyed that. Probably didn't enjoy so much that I said K. May is going to be playing. But for Blaine, for Brooks, for Dogs Daily on SI.com, y'all feel free to hop over there and check out all that stuff that we've got on dogsdaily.com. I can't remember what we're going to have in the morning, but we're going to have something for you guys in terms of an article. I know we'll have this put up. So if you missed any portion of tonight's show, feel free to check it out over on dogsdaily.com. I'm going to shut up and get out of here because the Clippers are playing the Mavericks.